Jake Miller wiped his sweaty palms on his uniform for the third time in 10 minutes. The young diplomat had been on many missions before, but nothing like this. Today, humanity would meet the Valkyrie Empire for the first time. These aliens controlled a huge part of the galaxy, and Earth needed their friendship. The human ship called Stellar Dawn moved slowly toward the massive alien station. Through the windows, Jake could see the dark metal structure that looked like a giant spider floating in space. Red lights blinked along its arms, and smaller ships moved around it like tiny fish. "Stop looking so nervous," said Captain Betty Ross as she walked up behind him. She was a tough woman with gray hair who had been flying ships for 20 years. "You look like you're going to throw up." "I feel like I might," Jake said honestly. He was only 25 and had never done anything this important before. "What if I mess this up? What if I say something wrong?" Tom Brady, the chief science officer, laughed from his seat nearby. He was a big man with a beard who always tried to make jokes when people felt scared. "Just don't tell them you want to eat their babies or something. How hard can it be?" Jake did not think that was funny. He had studied the Valkyrie for months, but there was still so much they did not know. The aliens looked like humans in many ways, but they were pale as snow and had red eyes. They lived for hundreds of years and were said to drink something like blood for food. Some people called them space vampires, but that was just talk. The ship's computer made a soft sound. "We are being contacted by the Valkyrie station," it said in its calm voice. Captain Ross straightened her uniform. "Put them on screen." The main viewer lit up with the image of a tall alien woman. She had long white hair and skin so pale it almost glowed. Her eyes were deep red like rubies, and she wore a black dress that seemed to flow like water. When she spoke, her voice was smooth and cold. "Human vessel, you are welcome at Station Nix. I am Commander Zara. Queen Lysara waits to meet with your representatives. Follow our guide ships to Docking Bay 7. "Thank you, Commander," Captain Ross replied. "We look forward to meeting your queen." The screen went dark. Jake felt his heart beating fast. In 1 hour, he would be face to face with the most powerful alien ruler in known space. The docking went smoothly. The Valkyrie station was beautiful inside, with high ceilings and walls that seemed to be made of black glass. Soft red lights gave everything a warm glow. The air smelled like flowers and something else Jake could not name. Their alien guide led them through long hallways filled with strange art. Jake saw paintings that seemed to move when he looked at them and statues that felt like they were watching him. Other Valkyrie they passed all looked perfect, like living dolls with their pale skin and bright eyes. Finally, they reached 2 huge doors made of dark wood. The guide stopped and turned to them. "Beyond these doors is the throne room. Queen Lysara waits inside. Remember to bow when you see her. Do not speak unless she asks you a question." Jake's mouth felt dry. Captain Ross put a hand on his shoulder. "You'll be fine," she whispered. "Just remember your training." The doors opened with a sound like thunder. The throne room was the biggest space Jake had ever seen. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. Hundreds of Valkyrie nobles stood along the walls, all dressed in black and watching silently. At the far end of the room sat a throne made of what looked like black crystal. And on that throne sat Queen Lysara. Jake forgot how to breathe. The queen was the most beautiful and terrible thing he had ever seen. She was tall even sitting down, with skin like fresh snow and hair so white it hurt to look at. Her dress was deep red like blood, and it moved around her like it was alive. But it was her eyes that made Jake's knees weak. They were red like fire and seemed to look right into his soul. "Approach," the queen said. Her voice filled the huge room easily. Jake walked forward with Captain Ross and Tom beside him. His legs felt like water, but somehow he kept moving. When they reached the throne, all 3 humans bowed low. "Rise," Queen Lysara said. "So you are the humans we have heard stories about." "You are smaller than I expected." Captain Ross stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we are honored to meet you. I am Captain Betty Ross of Earth. This is my science officer, Tom Brady, and our diplomat, Jake Miller." The Queen's red eyes moved to look at each of them. When her gaze fell on Jake, he felt like a mouse being watched by a cat. "Tell me, humans," the Queen said slowly. "What do you hope to gain from meeting with us?" Captain Ross began to speak about trade and friendship between their peoples. Jake tried to listen, but he was too nervous. His hands were shaking and sweat was running down his back. Then the Queen asked a question that made his blood turn to ice. "And what of your mating customs? How do humans choose partners?" The room went very quiet. Jake knew this was an important moment. The Veil Theory needed to understand human culture if they were going to be friends. But his mind went blank. All his training disappeared. Well, Jake heard himself saying before he could stop. I guess you could say when we really like someone, we just tell them straight up. Like, I want you. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Jake realized what he had just said and felt his face turn red. He had been trying to make a joke, to show how humans could be direct about feelings, but the way it came out sounded like he was talking to the Queen herself. The translator device on his belt made soft sounds as it changed his words into the Valthyri language. Jake watched in horror as Queen Lysara's eyes grew wide. The nobles along the walls began to whisper among themselves. The Queen stood up slowly from her throne. She was even taller than Jake had thought, and her red eyes seemed to glow brighter. "You declare yourself to me, human?" she asked, her voice carrying across the silent room. Jake opened his mouth to explain, to say it was all a mistake. But no words came out. He looked at Captain Ross, who stared back at him with shock and fear. Queen Lysara smiled, showing teeth that were too white and too sharp. How interesting. In 800 years, no one has been so bold. She sat back down and studied Jake like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve. I will consider your proposal, Jake Miller of Earth. You have 1 month to prepare a proper courtship. We will speak again soon. The Queen waved her hand and guards appeared from nowhere. Escort our guests to their rooms. They will be staying with us for a while. As Jake was led away, he could hear Tom whispering behind him. Well, you really did it now, buddy. 3 days had passed since Jake's terrible mistake, and things were getting worse by the hour. He sat in his guest room staring at the wall, trying to figure out how to fix the mess he had made. The room was beautiful, with soft furniture and windows that showed the stars, but it felt like a prison. A soft knock came at his door. Jake opened it to find a Valthyri servant holding a silver box. The alien was young-looking, with the same pale skin and red eyes as all his people, but he seemed nervous. From Queen Lysara, the servant said quietly, then hurried away before Jake could ask any questions. Inside the box, Jake found a piece of paper covered in strange writing. The words slowly changed into English as he watched, thanks to the translation technology the Valthyri used. My dear Jake, the letter said, I have been thinking about you since our meeting. Your boldness excites me. I want to know more about human customs. What foods do you eat? What music do you enjoy? What makes your heart race? I await your answers, Lysara. Jake dropped the letter like it was on fire. This was bad. Very bad. He walked quickly to Captain Ross's room down the hall. She was sitting at a desk, trying to send messages back to Earth, but the Valthyri were blocking most of their communications. She sent me a letter, Jake said. Showing her the paper, Captain Ross read it and shook her head. Jake, I think she really believes you want to marry her. I have to tell her it was a mistake, Jake said. I have to explain about human jokes and sarcasm. Tom Brady looked up from his computer in the corner. I've been studying their culture more. Jake, the Valthyri don't understand jokes the way we do. They're very serious people, and their queen has never been told no about anything. What do you mean? Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. I mean, Queen Lysara has ruled for 800 years. She's the most powerful being in this part of the galaxy. If she wants something, she gets it always. Jake sat down hard in a chair. So what happens if I keep saying no? Captain Ross and Tom looked at each other. We don't know, Captain Ross said slowly. But it might mean war between humans and the Valthyri Empire, and we would lose. That evening, another gift arrived. This time it was a set of clothes made from fabric that felt like silk, but looked like it was woven from starlight. The clothes fit Jake perfectly, which meant the Queen had been studying him very carefully. The next morning brought more gifts. A necklace made of stones that glowed with inner light, a book of Valthyri poetry that the translator said was about love and longing, a small plant that smelled like earth flowers but had silver leaves. With each gift came another letter. The Queen asked about human art, human dreams, human fears. Her writing became more personal with each message. She told Jake about her lonely life as a ruler, about how boring it was to have everyone agree with everything she said. You interest me, Jake Miller, one letter said. You are not like my people. You show emotion on your face. You seem to feel things strongly. I want to understand this. I want to understand you. Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's doctor and scientist, came to see Jake on the 4th day. She was a smart woman who studied alien life forms, and she looked very worried. "Jake, I've been reading about Valkyrie biology," she said. "There's something you need to know about their mating customs." Jake felt his stomach turn cold. "What? They don't just get married like humans do. They have something called a life bond. It's a mental connection that links two minds together forever. If you bond with Queen Lysara, you would share her thoughts and feelings. You would live as long as she does, but you wouldn't be completely human anymore." The room went very quiet. Jake stared at Dr. Park, hoping he had heard wrong. "There's more," she continued. "Once the bond is made, it can never be broken. Ever. And Jake, she's not just any Valkyrie. She's their queen. The bond would make you part of her empire in ways you can't imagine." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He stood by his window looking out at the stars and thinking about home. Earth seemed so far away now, and he might never see it again. A sound made him turn around. Queen Lysara stood in his room like a ghost. She moved so quietly that he hadn't heard her come in. In the dim light, she looked even more beautiful and scary than before. "You seem troubled, my dear Jake," she said in her smooth voice. Jake's heart pounded, but he tried to stay calm. "Your Majesty, I think there's been a misunderstanding. When I said those words in the throne room, I didn't mean them the way you think." The queen moved closer. She was so tall that Jake had to look up to meet her red eyes. "Explain this to me. Humans sometimes say things they don't really mean. We call it joking or being sarcastic. I was nervous and said something stupid. I wasn't really asking you to marry me." Queen Lysara studied his face for a long moment. Then she smiled, and Jake saw her sharp teeth gleam in the starlight. "How fascinating," she said. "You try to take back your words now that you see my power. This makes you even more interesting." "No, that's not what I meant," Jake said quickly. "I have been alive for 8 centuries, Jake Miller. I have seen fear, anger, greed, and hatred. But I have never seen anyone try to escape from me using something called sarcasm. Your people are strange and wonderful." She walked to his window and looked out at the stars. "Do you know how long it has been since someone surprised me? Do you know how boring it is to rule people who only tell you what you want to hear?" Jake didn't know what to say to that. "Your Captain Ross sent me information about human culture," the queen continued. "You eat plants and animals from your world. You create art that shows pain and joy together. You laugh when things are not funny and cry when you are happy. You are chaos in living form." She turned back to look at him. "I find this chaos beautiful. I want to study it. I want to study you." "Your Majesty," Jake said carefully, "humans value freedom. We don't like being studied like insects." Queen Lysara laughed, and the sound was like silver bells. "There, you do it again. You tell me something I do not want to hear. My own people would never dare speak to me this way." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "I am not giving up on you, Jake Miller. You have shown me something new, and I will not let that go. Think carefully about my offer. You could rule beside me. You could bring your chaos to my ordered world and make it beautiful." After she left, Jake sat on his bed and put his head in his hands. The queen wasn't going to listen to reason. She thought his fear and honesty were just more interesting human traits to study. The next morning brought the worst news yet. Tom Brady found Jake in the dining hall and sat down with a grim expression. "I've been listening to Valkyrie communications," Tom said quietly. "The queen has been telling her nobles about you. Some of them are angry that she's interested in an alien. Others are trying to figure out how to use this situation for their own gain." "What does that mean for us?" Jake asked. "It means we're in the middle of alien politics now. And Jake, there's something else. The queen has been asking her scientists about human biology. She wants to know if the life bond will work between your species and hers." Jake felt sick. "What did they tell her?" "They think it will work, but they're not sure what it would do to you. You might gain some of her abilities, but you'd definitely lose some of your humanity." That afternoon, Jake got another letter from the queen. This one was different from the others. It wasn't asking questions about human culture. Instead, it was an invitation. "My dear Jake," it read, "I grow tired of waiting. Tomorrow night I am holding a feast in your honor. All the nobles of my court will attend. We will announce our engagement publicly. Prepare yourself for a new life, Lysara." Jake stared at the letter until the words blurred together. Tomorrow night, Queen Lysara would tell the entire Valkyrie Empire that she was going to marry a human. After that, there would be no going back. He had less than 24 hours to find a way out of this mess, or he would spend the rest of his very long life as the husband of an alien vampire queen. Jake stared at the invitation until his eyes hurt. Tomorrow night, Queen Lysara would announce their engagement to the entire Valthyri Empire. He had to do something, but what? Running away was impossible. The station was surrounded by space and their ship was being watched. He hurried to find Captain Ross and the others. They were all gathered in Tom Brady's room, looking at information on his computer screen. When Jake showed them the invitation, Dr. Lisa Park went very pale. "We're out of time," Captain Ross said. "We need a plan right now." "What if we just tell her the truth again?" Jake asked. "Really explain about human humor and make her understand?" Tom shook his head. "I've been studying more about Valthyri psychology. They don't think like us, Jake. The Queen sees your resistance as a game. She thinks you're playing hard to get and it's making her want you more." "Then what do we do?" Jake asked, feeling hopeless. Amy Clark, the other human diplomat on the team, had been quiet until now. She was a smart woman with short brown hair who usually helped Jake with difficult negotiations. "Maybe we're thinking about this wrong," she said slowly. "What do you mean?" Captain Ross asked. "We're trying to convince an alien queen that Jake doesn't want her. But what if we made Jake seem like such a bad choice that she wouldn't want him?" Dr. Park sat up straighter. "You mean make the queen lose interest in Jake by showing her things about humans that she would find disgusting?" "Exactly," Amy said. "Every species has things they can't stand. If we can figure out what the Valthyri hate most, we can make Jake seem awful to her." Tom started typing quickly on his computer. "I can access their cultural databases. Let's see what makes Valthyri sick or angry." For the next few hours, they studied everything they could find about Valthyri culture. They learned that the aliens liked order, beauty, and control. They hated chaos, loud noises, and messy eating. They thought strong smells were disgusting, and they never showed emotions in public. "Perfect," Amy said, making a list. "Jake, tomorrow you're going to be the worst human possible. You'll eat with your hands, laugh too loud, tell bad jokes, and generally act like everything they hate." "But what if it backfires?" Jake asked. "What if she finds that interesting too?" "It's our only chance," Captain Ross said. "We'll also send information about human culture to the Queen's advisors. We'll make it sound like all humans are chaotic and impossible to control." They worked through the night preparing their plan. Tom created fake videos showing humans acting wild and messy. Amy wrote reports about human behavior that made them sound like dangerous animals. Dr. Park prepared some earth spices that would smell terrible to Valthyri noses. The next evening came too quickly. Jake put on the fancy clothes the Queen had given him, but he hid small bags of earth spices in his pockets. He practiced acting rude and sloppy, even though it made him feel sick to think about insulting the Queen. "Remember," Amy said as they walked toward the feast hall, "you need to be so awful that she gives up on you completely. But not so awful that she decides to execute me," Jake added nervously. The feast hall was even bigger than the throne room. Hundreds of Valthyri nobles sat at long tables covered with beautiful food. Everything was perfectly arranged, from the crystal glasses to the silver plates. The aliens all wore their best clothes and spoke in quiet, polite voices. Queen Lysara sat at the high table, wearing a dress that looked like it was made from liquid gold. When she saw Jake enter, her red eyes lit up with happiness. She stood and raised her glass. "My noble friends," she announced, "tonight we celebrate something wonderful. I have chosen a mate from the human species. Jake Miller will become my consort and help me rule our empire." The room filled with polite applause, but Jake could see that many of the nobles looked unhappy about this news. Good, he thought. Maybe they would help convince her this was a bad idea. Jake was seated next to the Queen at the high table. She smiled at him and offered him a glass of dark red liquid that smelled like iron and flowers. "To our future together," she said. This was it. Time for Jake to put their plan into action. Instead of taking the glass carefully like a gentleman, he grabbed it roughly and drank the whole thing in one gulp. Then he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and let out a loud burp. The entire hall went silent. Every Valthyri in the room stared at Jake with shock and disgust. Queen Lysara's smile flickered for just a moment. "Excuse me," Jake said loudly. "Where I come from, that means the drink was really good." He could see Captain Ross and the others at a nearby table trying not to look worried. So far, so good. When the food came, Jake ate like a wild animal. He grabbed meat with his hands, talked with his mouth full, and deliberately spilled sauce on his shirt. He told loud jokes that weren't funny and laughed at his own stories. Every few minutes he would scratch himself or pick his teeth. The Valtheri nobles looked horrified. Some of them got up and left their tables. Others whispered among themselves, clearly upset that their queen wanted to marry such a creature. But when Jake looked at Queen Lysera, his heart sank. She wasn't disgusted at all. Instead, she was watching him with fascination, like he was the most interesting thing she had ever seen. "Tell me, Jake," she said during a break in his terrible performance. "Do all humans eat this way?" "Oh yes," Jake said, spraying crumbs as he talked. "We're all like this. Messy, loud, and rude. We can't help it." Queen Lysera's eyes grew brighter. "How wonderful. You have no control over your natural urges. You are pure instinct and emotion." This wasn't working. Jake pulled out one of Dr. Park's spice bags and opened it. A smell like rotten eggs mixed with dead fish filled the air. Several nobles actually ran from the room. "This is my favorite cologne," Jake announced, rubbing the spice on his neck. "All human males wear it." Queen Lysera leaned closer and breathed in the terrible smell. Jake expected her to recoil in horror, but instead she closed her eyes like she was enjoying it. "Fascinating," she whispered. "It's so strong and primitive. So different from our gentle perfumes." Jake felt panic rising in his chest. Nothing was working. Every horrible thing he did just made the queen more interested in humans. He tried one last desperate act. He stood up on his chair and began to sing a Earth song very badly and very loudly. It was a song about freedom and running away, and he sang it off-key while dancing on the table. The remaining Valtheri nobles fled the hall in embarrassment. Even the queen's guards looked upset. But Queen Lysera began to clap her hands with delight. "Beautiful," she cried. "You express yourself with such passion, such chaos. I have never seen anything like it." Jake stopped singing and stared at her in despair. Their plan had failed completely. Instead of driving the queen away, he had convinced her that humans were the most exciting creatures in the galaxy. "My dear Jake," Queen Lysera said, standing up and taking his hand, "you have shown me tonight how wonderful your species truly is. I was right to choose you. Together we will bring this beautiful chaos to my empire." She turned to address the few nobles who remained in the hall. "Let it be known throughout the empire that humans are under my personal protection. Any who harm them will answer to me. And prepare the bonding chamber. Tomorrow night Jake Miller and I will be joined for eternity." As the queen led him away from the ruined feast, Jake caught a glimpse of his friends' faces. They looked as hopeless as he felt. Their plan had not just failed, it had made everything worse. That night, alone in his room, Jake sat by the window and stared out at the stars. Tomorrow night, he would undergo the Valtheri bonding ritual and become something that was no longer fully human. He would be tied to Queen Lysera forever, sharing her thoughts and feelings until the end of time. But as he sat there, an idea began to form in his mind. A crazy, dangerous idea that might be their only hope. The queen was fascinated by human emotion and chaos. What if instead of trying to hide those things, he showed her something she had never seen before? What if he showed her what it really meant to be human? Jake stood up and looked at his reflection in the dark window. Tomorrow he would have one last chance to save himself and his people. But this time he wouldn't pretend to be something he wasn't. This time he would be completely honestly human, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to reach whatever heart still beat inside the alien vampire queen. Jake woke up on what might be his last day as a human. Sunlight from the station's artificial star streamed through his window, but it felt cold against his skin. Tonight, Queen Lysera expected him to go through the bonding ceremony that would link their minds forever. He had spent most of the night thinking about his plan. It was risky and might get him killed, but it was better than becoming something he wasn't. Jake was going to tell Queen Lysera the complete truth about everything. His fear, his loneliness, and why he could never be what she wanted him to be. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. A Valtheri servant entered with breakfast and another letter from the queen. This one was shorter than the others. "My dearest Jake," it read, "tonight we begin our eternal life together. I have prepared the bonding chamber with flowers from 100 worlds. By tomorrow, you will share my thoughts and I will share yours. We will never be apart again. Lysera." Jake set the letter aside and tried to eat, but the food tasted like dust in his mouth. Another knock came, and this time Captain Ross entered with Tom Brady and Dr. Park. "Any luck reaching Earth?" Jake asked. Captain Ross shook her head. "The Valtheri are still blocking our long-range communications. Earth doesn't even know what's happening to us." I've been studying the bonding process, Dr. Park said quietly. Jake, once it's done, there's no going back, ever. The Queen's mind will be connected to yours permanently. You'll gain some of her abilities, but you'll also start thinking like her. In time, you might forget what it was like to be human. Tom sat down heavily in a chair. I keep thinking there has to be something we can do, some way to make her understand that this is wrong. There is, Jake said, and they all looked at him with surprise. I'm going to ask her for a private meeting before the ceremony. I'm going to tell her everything, about the translation mistake, about human emotions, about why I can't bond with her. Jake, you've tried explaining before, Captain Ross said. She doesn't listen. This time will be different, Jake said. This time I'm not going to try to be diplomatic or polite. I'm going to be completely honest, even if it makes her angry. Dr. Park looked worried. What if she decides to punish you for refusing her? Then at least I'll die as a human, Jake replied. That afternoon, Jake sent a message to Queen Lysara asking for a private audience. Within an hour, a response came back. She would see him in her personal chambers at sunset, just before the bonding ceremony was supposed to begin. As the time approached, Jake felt surprisingly calm. He had spent so many days being afraid and trying to think of clever plans. Now that he had decided to simply tell the truth, the fear was gone. Whatever happened next, at least he would face it honestly. The Queen's chambers were smaller than Jake had expected, but more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. The walls were covered with paintings that seemed to move in the soft light. Strange musical instruments from different worlds sat on elegant tables. Books in dozens of alien languages filled tall shelves. Queen Lysara waited for him by a window that showed the stars. She wore a simple white dress instead of her usual royal robes, and her long hair hung loose around her shoulders. For a moment, she looked almost human. "You wish to speak with me before our ceremony," she said without turning around. "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake said. "I need to tell you some things, and I need you to really listen this time." She turned to face him, and Jake saw something in her red eyes that he hadn't noticed before. Loneliness. Deep, ancient loneliness that had been there for hundreds of years. "Speak then," she said. Jake took a deep breath. 8 days ago, when I said those words in your throne room, it was a mistake. I was nervous and scared, and I said something stupid without thinking. I wasn't proposing to you. I was just a young man who was in way over his head. Queen Lysara started to speak, but Jake held up his hand. "Please let me finish. I know you think my fear and confusion are interesting. I know you see human emotions as some kind of beautiful chaos, but you don't understand what those emotions really mean." He walked closer to her, no longer caring about royal protocol. "I'm afraid because I'm 25 years old and I've never been away from Earth this long before. I miss my home. I miss my family. I miss simple things like rain and the smell of grass and the sound of human laughter." The Queen's expression didn't change, but Jake thought he saw her listen more carefully. "You want to bond with me forever, but you don't know who I really am," Jake continued. "I'm not some perfect example of human chaos. I'm just a person who makes mistakes and gets scared and dreams about things I might never have. If you bond with me, you won't get some exciting alien experience. You'll get my worries about whether my mother is proud of me, my fear that I'm not smart enough for my job, and my sadness that I might never see Earth again." For the first time since he had met her, Queen Lysara looked uncertain. "You speak of pain as if it were precious," she said slowly. "It is precious," Jake said. "Pain and fear and sadness are what make joy and love and hope so wonderful. Without one, you can't really have the other. That's what you don't understand about humans. We're not just chaos. We're the balance between light and dark, between happiness and sorrow." He stepped even closer, looking directly into her ancient red eyes. "You've lived for 800 years, but when did you last feel anything real? When did you last cry because something was beautiful, or laugh because you were truly happy, or love someone so much it scared you?" Queen Lysara was very quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Jake had ever heard it. "I do not remember." "That's what I thought," Jake said gently. "You're fascinated by human emotions because you've forgotten how to feel them yourself. But bonding with me won't fix that. It will just make me as empty as you are." The Queen turned back to the window, staring out at the stars. "You think I am empty?" "I think you're lonely," Jake said. "I think you've been powerful for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be vulnerable. And I think that's why you want me, because I remind you of something you lost a long time ago." "And what is that?" Your heart, Jake said simply. Queen Lysara was silent for so long that Jake began to wonder if he had gone too far. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. If I am as empty as you say, then what would you have me do? Jake felt a spark of hope. I would have you feel something real just once. Not because you're fascinated by alien emotions, but because you remember what it was like to be alive inside. The Queen turned to face him again, and Jake saw something amazing. There were tears in her red eyes. Actual tears, and if I could feel again, she said, what then? Would you stay with me? Jake shook his head. No, if you could feel again, you wouldn't want me to stay. You'd understand why I need to go home. Queen Lysara walked to a chair and sat down as if her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. You offer me pain instead of power, loneliness instead of companionship. Why would I want such things? Because they're real, Jake said. And because somewhere inside you, in whatever is left of your heart, you remember that real is better than empty. The Queen looked at him for a long time. Then slowly she smiled. But this smile was different from all the others. It wasn't cold or calculating or amused. It was sad and genuine and human. You are either very brave or very foolish, Jake Miller, she said. Maybe both, Jake admitted. Queen Lysara stood up and walked to her desk. She picked up a small crystal device and spoke into it. Cancel the bonding ceremony. Tell the court that there has been a change of plans. Jake's heart jumped with hope, but the Queen wasn't finished. Instead, she continued, we will hold a test. If Jake Miller can prove to me that his humanity possesses something my empire lacks, I will release him and establish favorable relations with Earth. But if he fails, he will bond with me willingly and help me rule the galaxy. She set down the device and looked at Jake with eyes that seemed to see right through him. You have challenged me, human. Now I challenge you. Make me feel something I have not felt in 8 centuries. You have until dawn. As Jake left the Queen's chambers, his mind raced with possibilities. He had convinced her to give him a chance, but now he faced an impossible task. How do you make someone feel again after 800 years of emptiness? How do you touch a heart that has been frozen for longer than human civilization has existed? He had until sunrise to find the answer, or he would spend eternity as the consort of an alien vampire queen. Jake had 6 hours until dawn. 6 hours to make an 800-year-old alien queen feel something she hadn't felt in centuries. He sat in his room staring at the wall and trying to think of what to do. Captain Ross, Tom Brady, Dr. Park, and Amy Clark all came to help him brainstorm. They suggested showing her human art, playing Earth music, or telling her stories about human history. But Jake shook his head at every idea. She's already fascinated by human culture, he said. That's not what she needs. She needs to remember what it feels like to be alive, not just to watch life from the outside. But how do you do that? Amy asked. How do you teach someone to feel? Jake thought about his conversation with the Queen. She had asked when she last cried because something was beautiful, or laughed because she was happy, or loved someone so much it scared her. Those were the emotions that made life worth living, but they were also the emotions that came with pain. She's afraid, Jake said suddenly. Afraid of what? Tom asked, of feeling. She's been powerful and in control for so long that she's forgotten emotions can hurt. But pain is part of what makes us human. If I can show her that pain isn't something to fear, maybe she'll remember how to feel everything else too. Dr. Park looked worried. Jake, what are you thinking of doing? I'm going to tell her about loss, Jake said. About love that ends, about people who die, about dreams that don't come true. I'm going to show her that humans aren't just chaos and passion. We're people who know we're going to lose everything we care about, and we choose to care anyway. An hour before dawn, Jake went back to Queen Lysara's chambers. She was waiting for him in the same white dress, sitting by the window and watching the stars. She looked even more tired than before, as if their earlier conversation had drained something from her. Have you come to dazzle me with human tricks? She asked without looking at him. No, Jake said, sitting down across from her. I've come to tell you about my brother. Queen Lysara turned to look at him with surprise. Your brother? His name was Danny, Jake said. He was 2 years younger than me, and he was everything I wasn't. Smart, funny, brave. He wanted to be a pilot like our dad, and he was good at it. Really good. Jake paused, remembering. When we were kids, Danny and I would sneak out at night to look at the stars. He'd tell me about all the places he was going to fly someday, all the worlds he was going to see. He had so many dreams. What happened to him? Queen Lysara asked quietly. There was an accident during a training flight when he was 22, Jake said, his voice getting softer. His ship had a malfunction and he couldn't eject in time. He died doing what he loved, but that didn't make it hurt any less. The Queen was very still, listening. I became a diplomat partly because of Danny, Jake continued. He always said that the best part of exploring space would be meeting new people, learning about different cultures. When he died, I felt like I had to carry on that dream for him. Jake looked directly at Queen Lysera. Do you know what the hardest part was? It wasn't the funeral or the grief. It was the way people stopped talking about him. After a few months, everyone moved on with their lives. But I couldn't move on because moving on felt like forgetting him. But you are here now, far from your world, the Queen said. Did you forget him? No, Jake said. I carry him with me. Every time I meet someone new, every time I try to understand a different culture, I think about how excited Danny would have been. The pain of losing him is part of who I am. But so is the love I had for him. They exist together. Queen Lysera was quiet for a long moment. Why do you tell me this sad story? Because you asked me to make you feel something, Jake said. And I think the reason you stopped feeling was because you were afraid of stories like this one. You were afraid of caring about people who would die, of loving things you might lose. Jake stood up and walked to the window beside her. But here's what you need to understand about humans. We know that everyone we love will die someday. We know that every beautiful moment will end. We know that we'll lose everything eventually, and we choose to love anyway. That seems foolish, Queen Lysera said, but her voice was uncertain. Maybe it is, Jake said, but it's also brave, and it's what makes us alive. You've lived for 800 years, but how much of that time have you really been living? How much of it has just been existing? The Queen stood up and walked away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. You do not understand what it is like to watch everything you care about turn to dust. You do not know what it is like to see civilizations rise and fall while you remain unchanged. You're right, Jake said. I don't know what that's like. But I know what it's like to be so afraid of losing someone that you don't let yourself care about them. I did that for a long time after Danny died. I kept people at a distance because I was scared of being hurt again. And what changed? The Queen asked. I realized that the pain of losing Danny was nothing compared to the emptiness of not caring about anyone. The hurt was proof that our relationship mattered. It was proof that he had been real, and that the love between us had been real too. Jake walked over to where Queen Lysera stood with her back to him. You're not empty because you're immortal. You're empty because you chose to stop caring. You decided that avoiding pain was more important than feeling love. The Queen turned around and Jake saw that she was crying again. But this time the tears looked different. They looked like relief, I remember, she whispered. I remember caring about someone once. Long ago when I was young. What happened? Jake asked gently. He was a poet, a mortal from my own species. He wrote beautiful words about the stars and the meaning of life. I loved him more than I had ever loved anything. Her voice broke slightly. But he grew old while I stayed young. I watched him become weak and sick, and then I watched him die. After that, I swore I would never care about anyone who could leave me. And you kept that promise for 800 years, Jake said. Yes. I surrounded myself with servants and subjects who would never dare to leave me. I chose power over love because power felt safer. Jake stepped closer to her. But it didn't make you happy, did it? Queen Lysera shook her head. No, it made me nothing. I became a living statue, beautiful and powerful and completely hollow inside. She wiped the tears from her eyes and looked at Jake with wonder. How did you know? How did you know that this was what I needed to remember? Because I've been there, Jake said simply. Maybe not for 800 years, but I know what it feels like to be so afraid of pain that you stop living. The Queen walked back to the window and looked out at the stars. The sky was beginning to lighten with the approach of dawn. If I release you, she said slowly, if I let you go back to your people, what will become of me? How do I learn to feel again after so long? Jake thought about this carefully, the same way anyone learns to feel again. One day at a time. One small choice at a time. Maybe you start by caring about your people not as subjects but as individuals with their own dreams and fears. And if it hurts, then you'll know you're alive again. Queen Lysera was quiet for a long time, watching the sunrise through the window. When she finally spoke, her voice was different than it had ever been before. It was soft and real and full of something that might have been hope. Jake Miller, she said, you have given me something more valuable than a kingdom. You have given me back my heart. She turned to face him with a smile that was sad and beautiful and completely genuine. I release you from my proposal. Return to your people with my blessing, and tell them that the Valkyrie Empire will be their friend, not because of politics or trade agreements, but because you reminded me what friendship means. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized was there. What about you? What will you do now? I will try to remember how to be a person instead of just a queen, she said. I will try to care about my people the way you care about your brother's memory. And perhaps someday I will learn to love again without being so afraid of loss. As Jake prepared to leave her chambers, Queen Lysera called out to him one last time. Jake, she said, thank you for showing me that pain and love are not enemies. Thank you for reminding me that being alive means being willing to hurt. Jake nodded and smiled. Thank you for listening. 3 days later, the human ship Stellar Dawn left the Valkyrie station with a formal treaty of friendship and trade. Jake stood at the observation deck, watching the alien station grow smaller in the distance. Captain Ross joined him at the window. Any regrets? She asked. Jake thought about Queen Lysera and wondered if she was looking at the stars and remembering how to feel. No regrets, he said. I think we both got what we needed. And what was that? She got her heart back, Jake said. And I got to come home. As the Stellar Dawn jumped to hyperspace and began its journey back to Earth, Jake smiled and thought about Danny. His brother would have loved this story, the young diplomat who accidentally proposed to an alien queen and ended up teaching her how to be human. Some adventures end with battles and explosions, some end with romance and grand gestures, but the best adventures, Jake thought, end with two people understanding each other a little better than they did before. And sometimes, that's enough to change the galaxy.